Welcome in, everybody. Today's deep dive is all about Care4kid's home in India.
Oh, fantastic.
And I am so excited about this one.
Yeah.
You sent me just an amazing array of sources.
Yeah, I think this is one of our best ones yet.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
We've got their Christmas newsletter, and we have an interview with one of the founders, and even some photos that really give us a glimpse into daily life there.
It's a really good mix to get the full picture.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
So get ready for heartwarming stories.
Absolutely.
And insights into the challenges that these kids face, and just a real understanding of what it takes to run a place like this.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a sense of the organization's heart and then also the vision of the founder, and then see how that vision plays out in the lives of the kids.
Yeah, it's a really cool progression.
Yeah.
Let's start with the Christmas newsletter.
Okay.
It's filled with like this warmth and gratitude for all the donations they've received.
Yeah, they seem really appreciative.
Yeah, and right away we're introduced to baby Joseph's story.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and this story really highlights the impact that Care4kid's home is having.
It really does. And Joseph's story is unfortunately way too common.
Right.
He's only 4 months old and living with his family in a remote jungle area.
Oh, gosh.
And with really limited access to medical care.
Right.
So it was actually their cook, Pravatma,
Okay.
who noticed that something was wrong with him.
Oh, wow.
Like, seriously wrong.
Gosh, thank goodness for her.
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds like the Care4kid's home team immediately stepped in and mobilized to get him help.
Yeah, look, what did they do?
Well, so Thambi, who's one of the founders, he personally went and got Joseph from the jungle and took him to the hospital in Iluru.
Wow.
But he was so sick that he had to be transferred to the ICU in Vijayawada.
What?
And everyone at Care4kid's home was anxiously awaiting updates.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Right.
Yeah.
It must have been such a relief when they found out that he stabilized.
Absolutely. And the letter mentions that Joseph and his mom are both staying at Care4kid's home while he recovers, and his dad's back in the jungle working.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, this is so real.
Right. It really gives you a sense of how complicated their whole situation is.
Yeah, it's just not like they provide medical care.
Right.
They're providing like this whole safety net.
Yeah, like a whole support system for the entire family. And the source material doesn't explicitly state this, but I mean, clearly the dad had to get back to work.
Right.
So, that speaks to the really challenging realities that a lot of these families face.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really insightful.
So, we also got to hear from Peter Kupers,
Okay.
who is one of the founders, and he did an interview with the Care4kidsindia podcast.
Oh, cool.
And he really gets into the why behind Care4kid's home.
Yeah, he seems like he would have a lot to say about it.
He does.
Yeah.
And he just paints this really stark picture of the challenges these children are up against.
I'm curious about this guidance model that Care4kid's home uses.
What is that?
Well, from what I read, it focuses on creating this environment where the kids can become self-reliant.
Okay.
And it prepares them for a future where they can thrive, on their own.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the specifics?
Well, unfortunately, the source doesn't really dive deep into that.
Oh, bummer.
But it sounds like they prioritize education, vocational training, and emotional support.
So all the biggies.
Right. And all within this structured environment. So they also get the sense of responsibility and accountability.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I guess if we wanted to know more about that, we'd have to do some additional research.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe Care4kidsindia would have more information about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that Peter addresses criticisms of aid organizations.
Right.
So what are some of the common critiques and how does he respond?
So one of the most frequent criticisms, and it's something to be really mindful of, I think, is that aid organizations sometimes create dependency rather than empowerment. And Peter argues that Care4kid's home's guidance model is designed specifically to avoid that pitfall.
Okay.
By equipping the kids with the skills and the confidence they need to become self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And he emphasizes that their goal is not to just, provide for the children's immediate needs, but to invest in their long-term success.
Right. It's about breaking the cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just, handing out aid.
Yeah. And, speaking of ensuring accountability, there was also a mention of their license renewal.
Oh, yeah. That's huge.
Right.
Yeah.
So that means that they were thoroughly inspected by the government.
Right.
And that they've met all the requirements.
Oh, wow.
For caring for these children.
Yeah, and they've been approved.
Right. So they're operating above board.
Which shows a real commitment to transparency.
Right.
Right.
Which I think is super important.
Absolutely.
And it also mentions that they need separate homes for boys and girls by law.
Oh, really? I wonder where that is.
I know. I wonder if that is reflecting some cultural norms in India.
Yeah, it could be. Or maybe just concerns about safety and well-being.
Right. It'd be interesting to, research that.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about somebody who really embodies the spirit of Share Kids Home.
Okay, who's that?
And that's Karunasri, the girls' warden.
Oh, yeah, I read about her.
Okay, her story is just incredible.
Oh, right.
She's been there for over 15 months, and it's clear that her dedication just goes so far beyond a typical job.
What's amazing is she has this IT background,
Right.
And she could have had this amazing career at DRDO, which is the Defense Research and Development Organization.
Wow.
It's super prestigious in India.
Okay, yeah, wow. So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she chose to work with these kids.
That's just, wow.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And I love how she says it. She says, I chose to work for these children because I find it a very noble and honorable job that helps me become a true human being.
Oh my gosh, that just gave me chills. That's so powerful.
Right. It really makes you think about what actually makes a meaningful life.
Right, what are we all doing here?
Right.
Yeah.
And I wonder if her choice reflects a broader trend in India.
Yeah.
Are the younger generations starting to, shift their values a little bit?
Right.
Or is it just the power of, this work that inspires people to have such incredible dedication?
Wow. I don't know, but I'm sensing a theme here.
Oh, yeah, me too. And we are just getting started.
Oh, yeah.
I think Karunasri's story really shows how much of an impact dedicated people can have on these kids' lives.
It's truly inspiring.
Yeah, and speaking of impact, you sent those photos of the kids playing games at Share Kids Home, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they might seem simple at first, but they show something really important about what Share Kids Home provides.
What's that?
I think it shows that they really are trying to give these kids a well-rounded childhood.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to just focus on the necessities like food and shelter and medical care.
Exactly. And we kind of forget about how important play is and just, simple joys.
Right.
But play isn't just about having fun.
Right.
It's crucial for development.
Yeah. How so?
Well, it helps kids build social skills and learn how to solve problems and cope with stress.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So these photos really do remind us that Share Kids Home is about more than just the basics.
Right.
They want to give these kids a sense of normalcy, a chance to just be kids.
I love that.
It goes back to that idea that every child deserves a childhood.
Yeah.
Filled with laughter and friendship and, freedom.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately for some kids, that's just not a reality.
Right. And that kind of brings us to Lakhita's story.
Oh, yeah.
Which really highlights the need that Share Kids Home is addressing.
Yeah. Her story's really tough.
Yeah. So Lakhita is a 6-year-old girl from a remote forest area.
Okay.
And she's living with her 2 sisters and her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And their mom's struggling to just make ends meet.
Oh, gosh.
Their father's an alcoholic and they're barely getting 1 meal a day.
That's just heartbreaking.
I know. It's just hard to imagine what that must be like.
Especially for kids that young.
Yeah. And thankfully, Lakhita's mom contacted the Child Welfare Committee.
Oh, okay.
And they intervened.
Oh, wow. So there are systems in place to help in those situations.
Yes, thankfully. And the good news is that Lakhita and her sisters are now being cared for at Share Kids Home.
Oh, that's such a relief.
It really is.
It's stories like Lakhita's that really highlight what a vital role Share Kids Home is playing.
Right, and it's not just about meeting those immediate needs. It's about creating a sustainable future for these kids.
Yeah, and that's where all those exciting developments come into play.
You mean like the new building?
Yeah, exactly.
And the website expansion.
Exactly. The fact that they were able to secure land for a new building near Denduluru
Yeah.
really speaks to their commitment to growth,
I'm really impressed by their ambition.
Yeah, and they're not just, maintaining the status quo.
Right.
They're planning for the future. They want to help even more children.
And they're being very transparent about the whole process.
Right. They're negotiating with donors and they've hired architects and engineers and they're sharing updates.
I love that.
It really builds trust when you see that level of transparency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially for an organization that relies so heavily on public support.
Exactly. And don't forget about the website now being available in Hindi and English.
Oh, yeah. That's huge for accessibility.
Right. Now, way more people can learn about their mission and potentially even get involved.
Yeah. It's such a good example of how even small steps can have a big impact.
It all goes back to creating that sustainable future that we were talking about.
Exactly.
By expanding their reach and increasing transparency.
Yeah.
Share Kids Home is really ensuring their ability to continue making a difference.
I agree. It's such a smart approach.
But of course, sustainability also means financial stability.
Right. Do you remember that breakdown of the yearly cost per child?
Oh, yeah, 990 euros, right?
Now, it covers housing, education, and nutrition.
Yeah, it really helps put things into perspective for potential donors.
Right. You can see exactly where your money's going.
Yeah, but we've talked about this before. Funding is often a major hurdle for organizations like this.
It really is.
Yeah.
So how does Share Kids Home deal with that?
Well, unfortunately, the sources we have don't get into the specifics of their financial strategies.
Oh, bummer.
But I think it would be really interesting to find out more about how they cultivate donor relationships and manage their resources and plan for the future.
Yeah. How do they deal with the uncertainty of relying on donations?
Right. It's a critical part of their long-term viability.
It really is. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of nonprofits.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you balance the need for financial stability with the fact that philanthropy is always changing?
It's a tough question, but what's clear from what we do know is that Share Kids Home is facing those challenges head on.
I agree.
Whether it's transparency or expanding their reach or providing a nurturing environment for the kids.
Right.
They're not shying away from the hard stuff.
They're really proactive.
Absolutely, and it's really inspiring to see.
It is, but I do wonder, are there any blind spots in their approach?
Like what?
Well, we talked about the potential for dependency.
Right.
But are there other things they need to consider?
That's a good question.
Like, how do they make sure they're respecting the cultural backgrounds of all these kids?
Oh, yeah, that's super important.
Right.
Yeah, cultural sensitivity is crucial in any work involving children from diverse backgrounds.
Right.
And while the sources don't really give us details on Share Kids Home's approach to this,
right,
I'm sure it's something they're very aware of.
Right. Especially given their focus on providing such a holistic environment.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'd be curious to learn more about how they incorporate cultural awareness into their daily work with the kids.
Yeah, it's a complex issue.
Yeah, it's about finding a balance between providing support,
right,
and respecting individual identities.
Exactly, and making sure everyone feels like they belong.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance.
It really is, and it requires constant reflection and a willingness to adapt.
For sure.
Because what works for one child might not work for another.
Right.
You have to recognize those differences and be willing to change your approach.
Absolutely. And I think it all comes back to those core values we've seen at Share Kids Home.
Like what?
Like compassion, transparency, a commitment to sustainability, and just this deep belief in every child's potential.
Yeah, they're really invested in these kids' futures.
Absolutely.
They're not just giving them a temporary solution.
Right. They're giving them the tools they need to become the best versions of themselves.
And that's what makes their work so powerful.
I agree.
They're not just meeting immediate needs.
Right.
They're breaking cycles of poverty.
And creating lasting change.
Exactly.
This is really inspiring.
It is.
Well, we covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But there's always more to learn.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So if you're feeling as inspired as I am, I encourage you to check out the Care4kidsindia podcast.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, they have more in-depth interviews and stories from the kids themselves.
Oh, wow.
And information on how you can get involved.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so we've seen all this amazing work that Share Kids Home is doing.
Yeah.
They're transforming lives and they're committed to these kids' futures.
Absolutely.
But let's zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
What's the bigger picture here?
You mean like the overall landscape of orphan care in India?
Exactly. Are there other organizations like this?
Yeah.
And what challenges do they face?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Right.
India's got this long and complicated history with orphanages.
Yeah.
And the system's gotten a lot of criticism over the years.
Like what kind of criticism?
Well, there have been reports of overcrowding and lack of resources, and even some cases of abuse.
Wow, that's awful.
It's really concerning.
Yeah, I mean, how common are those problems and what's being done about them?
Well, there are government regulations, and organizations like Share Kids Home have to go through these strict inspections to get their licenses.
But the problem is, enforcement isn't always consistent.
Right.
And there's just not enough resources to go around.
It sounds like a really tough situation.
Yeah, it's complicated. There's no easy fix.
So in that kind of environment, an organization like Share Kids Home is even more important. They're showing that it's possible to do things the right way.
Yeah, even within a system that's got all these problems.
Exactly. And we talked about funding being a big issue for nonprofits. Is that something that most organizations in this field struggle with?
Pretty much, yeah. Funding's almost always a problem.
Right.
Especially for groups that rely on donations.
Mm-hmm.
It makes them really vulnerable.
Especially when the economy is uncertain.
Right. And in a country like India where there's so much poverty and so many needs, the competition for funding is intense.
I can only imagine.
So when you think about all that, it makes Share Kids Home's accomplishments even more impressive.
It really does.
They're not giving up.
They're getting that land for a new building. They're expanding their reach, and they're constantly trying to do better for those kids.
Yeah, they're not just sitting back and accepting the situation.
Right. They're trying to overcome those limitations.
And their focus on sustainability is so smart.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Both financial sustainability and making sure the kids can be self-sufficient.
I mean, we talked about the dependency issue earlier.
Right.
But are there other ethical things they need to be thinking about?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, how do they respect the cultural backgrounds of the kids?
That's a great point. Cultural sensitivity is so important, especially when you're working with kids from different backgrounds.
Yeah, our sources didn't really go into detail on how Share Kids Home handles this.
Yeah, I wish we had more info on that.
Me too. But I'm sure it's something they think about a lot.
Oh, definitely.
Especially with their focus on creating such a supportive environment.
It's this bigger issue in orphan care in general.
How so?
It's about finding the right balance between providing support and respecting who these kids are.
Right, and making sure they feel like they belong.
Exactly.
It's a tough balance.
And it probably requires constant adjustments.
Yeah, you have to be willing to adapt.
Because what works for one kid might not work for another.
Exactly.
But you know, it all comes back to those core values that we've seen at Share Kids Home.
Yeah, like what?
Compassion, transparency, sustainability, and that belief in every child's potential.
They're not just offering a temporary solution. They're making a real investment in these kids' lives.
I love that.
They're really empowering them.
Absolutely.
That's what makes this work so meaningful.
We've learned so much today.
I know, right?
But I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Oh, there's always more to learn.
For sure, if you want to dive deeper.
Yeah.
I highly recommend checking out the Care4kidsindia podcast.
Oh, yeah, they have some great stuff.
They have interviews with the kids themselves.
Oh, wow.
And info on how to get involved.
Awesome.
So yeah, if you're feeling inspired, definitely check them out.
Well, this has been an amazing journey.
It really has.
Thanks for joining us as we explored Share Kids Home.
Yeah, it's been great.
We've seen these heartwarming stories and learned about the challenges of orphan care.
And the power of compassion.
Absolutely.
But before we go,
I
want to leave it with one last thought.
Okay, ready.
What can we learn from organizations like Share Kids Home? About how we can create a more just and equitable world for all kids?
That's a great question.
It's something to think about.
It is.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep making a difference.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, everyone.